turtles, they're transforming.
Hey everybody, today I've got a big important video for you folks because I'm going to be talking about Divinity Original Sin 2, which is by far one of the biggest games in terms of scope and scale that's going to be coming out here in 2017. Of course, this game was just released on Steam the other day after a fairly long and widely publicized early access process, which has received a lot of praise and buzz within the gaming industry, especially within the past several months. Of course, those of you who are fans of and who are familiar with the previous game, Divinity Original Sin, will no doubt recognize various aspects of what you're seeing here in this footage. And to a large extent, I'm going to sort of sidestep the nuts and bolts analytical assessment of this game, largely because I think for the most part, if you've played Divinity Original Sin, in particular the enhanced edition of that game that was released a couple of years ago, from a mechanics, gameplay, and fundamental architectural standpoint, Original Sin 2 does not deviate very far from the previous game. And that is by no means a bad thing, as those fundamental pillars of the gameplay were, quite frankly, phenomenal in the previous game. Where Original Sin 2 does make some pretty significant strides based on what I've seen after spending about 4 or 5 hours with the game thus far, is in the way it opens up the potential for role-playing experiences beyond the sort of hand-holdy golden path, very linear manner in which the previous game's introductory segments unfolded. One of my biggest complaints about Original Sin was that I often felt when playing through the early stages of the game as though I was on rails or on a path or living through someone else's adventure. Part of this was due to the limited options during character creation and character customization, but a lot of it also had to do with the nature of the game's story as a sort of world-shaping epic quest, and the fact that the story was presented in a way that, to me, felt very forced and very overt and therefore somewhat undesirable. Original Sin for me has always been a game that I've respected and absolutely loved from a mechanical standpoint and in terms of what it brings to the table as a total package. But where Original Sin 2 really shines and excels and surpasses its predecessor, in my opinion, is the manner in which it presents and introduces players into its world. It's now possible to create a completely custom player character, which can either be based on one of 8 fairly fleshed out character archetypes, or built from scratch from all the bits and pieces and component parts one would expect from a traditional, broad and deep pen and paper role-playing system. There's also a wonderful sense in the early stages of this game of being an individual having an individual experience, as opposed to having fate and circumstances and various obligations thrust upon you, as I felt was the case in the previous game. That simple change and that simple shift in tone does so much for me personally to make me feel more engaged and excited and interested in what's happening in the game. And I think that sort of thing goes to show how important the way a narrative is presented in a game can be, and the way that the subtleties of how the gameplay of a game allows a player to interact with that narrative matter. To me, it's an almost night and day difference in terms of my engagement with and enthusiasm for the game as a whole. In a lot of ways, from what I've seen so far, Original Sin 2 is the game I wanted Original Sin to be. Of course, this is an absolutely huge game in every sense of the word, and there's no possible way that in the span of 4 or 5 hours I could have any sort of genuine idea as to how the game will hold up over the long haul. But as a fan of the core concept and the core mechanics and the revised implementation of the narrative and character development experience, I am very much looking forward to diving headfirst into this game with some friends to thoroughly and completely explore it. and I would absolutely positively recommend giving this game a shot if you, like me, were enthusiastic about the previous game, but somewhat disappointed by its narrative elements. Between the built-in campaign and the extensive Game Master campaign creation and DM modes, this game seems poised to have an almost infinite amount of replayability and content, and I could not be happier or more excited about what I've seen of it thus far. If you are a fan of computer role-playing games, turn-based strategy games, cooperative games, and games that allow you to craft and or experience a wide range of user-created content, Divinity Original Sin 2 is pretty much a must-play based on what I've seen of it. All of the great mechanics, UI refinements, and control options from the enhanced edition of the first Original Sin are absolutely present here and refined to a brilliant sheen. And I do have to say that I've literally experienced nothing in the way of technical problems or issues with the game in these first several hours. Having said all that, I will repeat that this is an absolutely massive game, and my observations here should definitely not be taken as a review or endorsement of the game as a whole, but I do feel confident in saying that the game makes an absolutely stellar initial impression, and has most definitely given me exactly what I'd hoped for and most wanted from it thus far. As always, if you have enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more videos from me in the future, be sure to hit subscribe, and I will see you next time.